Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for coming to our panel. I'm going to introduce myself. I want to acknowledge Gzhimnidoo, my ancestors, as well as Odenong, where my heart is, where I grew up. Bojo, Skokie Kwan Dishnakaz, Mongdo Damin Gzhimnidoo Jaba, Anishinaabe Kwe Ndio. I said my Anishinaabe name is Red Earth Woman, and I'm a member of the Loon Clan at Minjikning Rama First Nation, Ontario, Canada. I grew up there. It's also known as Chippewas of Rama First Nation. On the shores of Lake Couchiching, my husband and I raised our children at Weequamecoong unceded territory on Manitoulin Island, Ontario, which is in the northern part of Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes. I'm grounded in Indigenous epistemology and Anishinaabe philosophy, reflected in the Ojibwe language, Anishinaabemowin. I'm an Anishinaabemowin learner, and I'm currently associate professor in the Faculty of Education at Lakehead University in Orillia, Ontario. I want to thank the organizational team for this symposium and say miigwech to Dr. Michael Hoshman at Lakehead University for inviting me. All peoples of the earth have been given original instructions for living in a good way with the natural order of things. The state of our world today indicates that human beings have discarded the ancient philosophies and ethical ways of being in sync with natural law. Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report in 2015 calls for honoring the truth and reconciling for the future. Indigenous people addressing the commission stated that we can't engage in true reconciliation until we have reconciled with the earth. Our panel members are Indigenous to what we call Canada today, and they will be sharing personal experience stories about land and water protection and educative work, honoring Indigenous knowledges and revitalizing relational ways of being. Peace and harmony in our world are supported as we walk with humility and enact reciprocity in our relationship with the lands and waters. I have the honor of chairing this panel on day 3 of the symposium, which is dedicated to peace, culture, and social justice. I'll be introducing 3 speakers and facilitating some discussion after. Please use the chat function to pose your questions or discussion points. So this is Odenong, where I grew up, where my heart is, like Couchiching. And the fall colors are starting. I'd like to introduce Sko Anung Kwe, Joanne Robertson. She's Bald Eagle Clan, a member of Atikamekw Anishinaabe Nation, Ontario. Joanne is an author and illustrator and a Turtle Island Water Walkers helper, having served for the good of Nibe water alongside grandmother Josephine Ba Mandamin. Joanne is an educator passionate about our shared responsibility for taking care of the water. We are all born of water, and the spirit of water carries all of our stories. Go ahead, Joanne.
Miigwech, Charla. Bonjour, everyone. Today, I'm happy to share with you a bit about our relationship and responsibility to water, as demonstrated by my grandmothers, the water walkers. and the youth following in their footsteps. So first slide, please, Charla. So in our creation stories, humans were the last to be created. All of our relations, the trees, animals, and plants came before us. We were created last because we need all of creation, all of our relatives to survive and to learn from. A tree doesn't need us to live. A plant doesn't need us to thrive. Water doesn't need us to flow, but we need them. We're all born of water, but we humans do not have sole right water. What we do have is a responsibility to respect and protect it for all creation, for our children, for future generations of people, trees, plants, and animals. Water is alive, it has a spirit, and it holds all our stories. It is the lifeblood of Mother Earth. When humans disrespect the water, we disrespect life. When we make the water dirty, we can sometimes boil it to make it safe for human consumption again. But a fish or a tree or a bird cannot boil their water. One of my teachers that taught me about my responsibility to water was Nokomis, or grandmother, Josephine Baum and Dahlman. Next slide, please, Charlotte. She loved Nebe, the water. In the year 2000, while at a gathering, she heard a prophecy given by Eddie Bob Benton-Benet, one of the founders of the American Indian movement and Grand Chief of a Medawan Medicine Society Lodge. He prophesied that in 30 years' time, if we continue with our negligence, water is going to cost as much as gold. What are you going to do about it? At age 60, when many people are thinking about retirement, Josephine Baum began her work in earnest for the water, when her and 4 others set off to walk around Lake Superior. These determined, loving, courageous grandmothers are known as the Mother Earth Water Walkers, and eventually they walked around all the Great Lakes on Turtle Island, or North America. The Mother Earth Water Walk is an Indigenous Anishinaabe-led ceremony for the water, rooted in Medawan Medicine Lodge teachings and protocols. From the time the copper pail of water is lifted to the time it touches down at the end of the day, the water keeps moving, flowing nonstop like a healthy river should. In 2011, after they had already walked all the Great Lakes on the St. Lawrence River, I began working with them for the water. That year, we carried the water from the 4 salt waters to Lake Superior. On the map, you can see the 4 colors, from the Pacific Ocean in black, from the Gulf of Mexico in red, from the Atlantic Ocean in yellow, and from Hudson Bay in white, all walking at the same time in different time zones, converging at Lake Superior 2 months later. During those 2 months, they walked over 14 million footsteps, demonstrating their love for water and us. Every step was a prayer for the water. A few years back, I read somewhere that on a hot summer's day, 1 birch tree can drink up to 2 bathtubs full of water. The grandmothers walked for their families too. In 2017, at age 75 and with Parkinson's, grandmother Josephine Baum walked her last big cross-country walk. Over 1,000 people joined in or contributed in some way to that walk. Josephine Baum walked on to the spirit world in 2019, but many of us promised her we'd continue our work for the water. Next slide, please. During the 2011 water walk, 3 generations of the Dorsey Lopez family walked from the Pacific Ocean to Lake Superior, the western leg of the walk. This image is of their son, 7-year-old Maingan Surratt. He took his turn carrying the eagle staff for the grandmothers. His older brother Phoenix, aged 11, and younger brother Bear, aged 3, also walked for the water that year. This year, Maingan started university, where he was awarded a full 4-year ride scholarship. He is studying the environment, focusing on the Great Lakes. Next slide, please. In August of this year, we walked around Lake Superior. This walk was led by 71-year-old Sharon Day. She has walked many times with Josephine Baum, and she herself has led 26 water walks for various lakes and rivers across the United States. They're highlighted in red on the map. This 34-day walk offered over 2.5 million footsteps and prayers for Lake Superior, the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area. This walk was to honor and thank Lake Superior and in memory of grandmother Josephine Baum and Dahlman that first walked around it 20 years ago. On the top left is Josephine Baum's sister, Melvina. Melvina was on all of her walks and she joined this year too. Even she carried the water using her walker. Bottom right is Andrew Mundaman, who is Josephine Baum's husband, and he supported her during all the walks, and he supported the walk this summer also. And to the left is Josephine Baugh and Sharon. And then the far left in the corner, that's the final touchdown this year's Lake Superior Water Walk. And I just wanted you to see all of the youth that joined in the water walk on that last day. So next slide, please. Visuals speak louder than words for some of us. So I created this collage at the end of the Lake Superior Water Walk. The lake was totally surrounded by love. The Mother Earth Water Walkers taught by Grandmother Josephine Bauman Dahman are continuing their work for the water. But there are others that were inspired by Grandmother Josephine Baugh to care for the water. They are using their unique gifts to strengthen their relationship with water. And they're answering the question, what are you going to do about it? The youth I'd like to introduce you to now are called the Junior Water Walkers. Next slide. One day, Peter Cameron and his son Kai were out walking in a park along the shore of Lake Superior in Thunder Bay, Ontario. When Kai noticed a woman, she was wearing a long ribbon skirt, carrying a copper pail in one hand and an eagle staff in the other. Kai asked his dad what he thought she was up to, and Peter said, let's go ask her. But during their brief discussion, she had walked out of range and I lost sight of her. Peter, a school teacher, returned to his classroom the following week, and on his desk was a new teacher's magazine. In it was a review of my book I wrote for Grandma Josephine Baugh called The Water Walker. And on the cover was the woman Peter and his son Kai had seen walking along the water the weekend before. Peter contacted me through Facebook, and a few weeks later, we visited his grade 5-6 classroom. While there, the students shared with us all they had been learning about water and the Great Lakes in particular, and how reading about Nokomis's work in the Water Walker had inspired them to do something for the water. Nokomis Josephine said to them during that visit, we're all born of water, we're all connected with the water, we're all related in that way. Even though we're not related by blood, we're related by water. So water is very precious for us. One of the students, speaking for her classmates, proudly announced to us, you're now looking at the new Junior Water Walkers. Filming with Canadian Geographic a couple hours later on the shore of Lake Superior, Josephine Baugh said this about the new Junior Water Walkers she had just met. They are encouraging other kids in other schools to do likewise. I know they will make an impact. Their hearts are in it. Next slide, please. The Junior Water Walkers, in their quest to build their relationship with water, have 4 pillars: connect, reflect, respect, and protect. Next slide, if you can, Charlotte. Peter Cameron's classroom of grade 5-6 students invited other classrooms around the Great Lakes and around the world to join them in learning about the water that they live near. This image shows Peter Cameron and Junior Water Walkers visiting, walking, and singing to and for the water. The Junior Water Walker pails, the one on the left reads, Dear Josephine, you are such an inspiring person and I love how you are so hardworking. Also, you are a hero to me and Nebe, that's water. Stay strong, from Owen. And the one pail on the right says, Dear Nokomis, thank you so much for inspiring me and my classmates and tons of people around the world. This map highlights where some of the Junior Water Walker classrooms were in the world at the end of 2019. There were over 200 classrooms, but there are many more now, and it's difficult to know the exact number. Their numbers grow every year, and let me explain how their message is rippling out to youth around the world. Next slide, please. During the 2021-22 school year, the Junior Water Walkers at Pope John Paul Senior Elementary School in Thunder Bay, Ontario, introduced water boxes. Guiding this effort are Peter Cameron, now in guidance, Alex Bush in guidance, and Martin White, their Indigenous counselor. Here's how they describe their efforts. Water boxes are handcrafted local white cedar boxes built by the native language classes and the Junior Water Walkers Club. The water boxes contain the Water Walker book, a handmade journal with a letter from the box creator, and other small gifts. The water boxes are filled with respect, love, and hope for Nebe. Like water, the water boxes are intended to keep moving. The first year, they gifted these water boxes to 60 classes across Turtle Island and around the world. A lot of learning and connecting to water is happening. And here are a few examples from water box classrooms. Kindergarten students are learning about the water cycle and states of water and wondering where snow and ice go. Grade 2-3s are taking their water box home to share with their families. And they're learning about different bodies of water, like trees, grass, flowers, lakes, and even themselves are bodies of water. They're identifying their connections to water, drinking, cleaning, cooking, fishing, and baptisms. They're testing the temperature and pH in a local creek to see if it's healthy for salmon. They're creating water filters and experimenting with them at their local creek. Through their own research, they discovered water allows the transfer of nutrients to plants. They've made posters and podcasts to share with their school during Earth Week. One class of second graders made a model of the land around their creek. They learned that garbage and chemicals cannot go down the storm drains because it doesn't get cleaned before it goes into their creek. Another grade 2 class looked at a globe to see the sources of fresh water and concluded there aren't many. Another grade 2 junior water walker wrote, trees need water, water makes sap, sap is like blood in trees. Trees are good for our health. Walking in a forest is calming. Trees help us breathe. So the kids are making all these connections. And here's a poem from a grade 4 junior water walker. Deep in the water, softly moving his fins, a carp dreaming. That was by Kyle in Gunnison, Colorado. And a grade 10 wrote, we need water to live, and we are not the only ones who need it. Yet we are the only ones who are hurting it. Shouldn't we keep it safe? All of these junior water walkers are strengthening their relationships to water, making the connections. At the end of the school year, they will hand their water box off to another class somewhere in the world. To date, there are 120 water boxes flowing around the world. Next slide, please. The day Nokomis passed away, the kids had these things to say. Today, we visited our ponds and said goodbye to Nokomis while promising to care for the water every day. She set a good example. Recycling a plastic bottle he found, DR said, now we have to do this job. Today is a sad farewell. We walk for Nokomis Josephine so she may rest. And another teacher tweeted, checking the beautiful creek on our knees, taking a deep breath and listening to nature without knowing we said goodbye to Nokomis. Another teacher's tweet that her students said are, now we have to do this job. Another student, we can teach everyone to care for the water like we do, even puddles are water and snow. You know why I decided to take swimming lessons? Because it would help me remember Nokomis. My favorite of all of these was a question, will she care for the clouds now? Next slide. Grandmother Josephine Baumann-Dahlmann loved water. She loved all of creation. All of those full heart actions, connections, and stories that I've shared came about because a grandmother dared to answer the question, what are you going to do about it? And because our most precious little water bodies, our children, are watching. Miigwech, very good listening.
Miigwech, Joanne. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker on the panel, Bomgijik Isaac Murdoch. He's Fish Clan from Serpent River, Anishinaabe Nation, Ontario. Bomgijik is a father, teacher, artist, and land back activist. Bomgijik has years of lived experience hunting and gathering on the land, and for several years, he's lived in the forest at Nimki Ajibikong, a land-based Anishinaabe community. Go ahead, Bomgijik. Can you unmute your microphone?
I am here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about Thunderbird Woman. But first, I'll just introduce my own self. Oani Bujo, and then we morgan a duck. Mazanapkan gay go na be Indigenous. Gonna be a gukcha biga wat and donjabak and oje and todem. Nishnabe nini and dao. Nimki ajbikong ninda. Gitchin and dum. Yama peewee ganon and guk. Agi ken mananek. Going with common and zeno on Ganak Nagay and Nina and then. Abdek we bescabing and a schnabe adso and Nikia. Andap nanan niab gedah kim nan. Nishna bekinach gedah min. Kapska ben dap nanan gao nitoying. Meanwhile, enwing. Going ge go and gosh me going. Inwin mon pianj payan and Nishna bekinach gedah min. So hello everybody, I'm Isaac Murdoch. I'm from Serpent River First Nation. The real name for that is the place where the serpents are painted on the rocks. And my native name is the man who paints the rocks. And I grew up in a very beautiful world where the stories of the land were my TV. So we didn't have a whole bunch of electronics and all of that. We had to play outside. And so stories and places were like my TV. Nature was my TV. And when I was growing up, they always talked about the Musanabiaganan, the sacred pictographs painted on the rocks. And because that's part of my name, that became my education. So as a young person, I didn't have to go to school no more, which was great. They sent me off into the bush. And over time, as I became a teenager, I started to travel around going to different pictograph sites, learning about the stories of our people. And one thing that I learned was that those pictures that are painted on the rocks, they're ceremony, and they're telling the history and story of who we are, and also instructing us on our original path on how to live here on Earth. And that these pictures are really just transcripts, if you will, of the relationship between us and the spirits that live with the earth and the water. And so, of course, I just became absolutely fascinated. But it wasn't until when I was in my 40s when I started to do art, or what I thought was art. I still get confused between the two. And of course, Thunderbird Woman, came to life. Thunderbird Woman was one of my first doodles. It wasn't my first. My first doodle was actually Josephine Wendaman. So I really appreciate the beautiful and expressively amazing depiction of Josephine and her work by Joanne Robertson. So the first doodle I did was, of course, Josephine Wendaman. And the next one was Thunderbird Woman, who is half Thunderbird and half Anishinaabe. And she's here to help protect the earth. She's an environmental superhero. And I always say that it's proven over history that our art has been important in influencing the social conscience of society into swaying it towards positive change. And I think Thunderbird Woman has done that in many different ways. And so if we look at some of the pictures here, we see Thunderbird Woman, Benesse Kwe, and it says end climate chaos. And this here is, I'm pretty sure it's down in the States. It looks like it's probably in either Los Angeles or maybe San Diego or something down there. But people start to take the image of Thunderbird Woman and use it as a way to say, hey, look, we need change. Indigenous people have a voice, and that there's a relationship between, resource extraction, man camps, and also how those things violate Indigenous women. And so I really wanted to make sure that, people understood the true intent of what Thunderbird Woman was. But at the same time, because she's a superhero, I didn't want her to have a face. I didn't want people she's kind of mysterious. But when you look at Thunderbird Woman, just from an artistic point of view, everything leads to the heart all the time. So the thunderbolts point to the heart, everything points to the heart. And of course, it's that's the main message of Thunderbird Woman, is that we have to love everything again. We can't continuing to try and defeat hate with hate or anger with anger. Love to me is the way to go. And I love this picture. It says a lot. And so if we can look at the next slide, that would be amazing. So again here, this was in Winnipeg, and I'm not exactly sure how this all came about. I wasn't there. But people definitely wanted to use Thunderbird Woman and the art that I had created to try and stop Energy East, which it was stopped. And they had this protest where hundreds and thousands of people eventually came, and they made these great big puppets of these Thunderbirds, and they put my art on banners and stuff, and they just went at it. And you see the person holding the Thunderbird Woman. There's a little lady in the middle. She's just right, she's holding the stick. You'll see her face right on the bottom beside the stick. Did you know that we ended up shacking up and she still lives with me? It's been over 5 years now. I don't know, the power of Thunderbird Woman got me something beautiful. So again, people were using art as a way to say, hey, look, we have a right, we have a say as Indigenous people. We also have a say to what goes on in our lands. And that, you know, we have to love everything. And when you're for something, it's better than being against something. And we're for the water, we're for the trees, we're for the animals, we're for all these things. And that becomes much more powerful than being against something. And so that's always been my philosophy from the start, just like Josephine. You know, Josephine was always for something. She was for the water, for the birds, for the butterflies, for the Banabe Quayak, the mermaids, and the water spirits. And so she led a revolution that expanded and touched so many different people. And, you know, that's something that I'll take away, because before that, before Josephine and Damon, you didn't see these great big art pieces happening. You didn't see, you know, again, at that time, before Josephine came aboard, there was a lot of confrontations with weapons and guns, and people were militarized and such and so forth. But after Josephine came, it's just like she laid a big heart on everybody. And that's the power of one person taking action. This is just a continuation of what Josephine had left for us. And we'll take a look at the next slide, Charla. And as a result, you know, I have hundreds of pictures of classrooms, of people all over the world sharing Thunderbird Woman with me. And on the left, now this is quite the deer. I ain't gonna lie to you. This lady on the left is a medicine woman. She lives in that wigwam behind her, in that teepee behind her, and she lives in northern Mongolia. And somehow she's seen Thunderbird Woman, or she's seen something going along with that, and she asked her daughter to go to town and print out the image of Thunderbird Woman so that she can hang it up in her wigwam. And she was very, very beautiful. And she couldn't speak English, and her daughter couldn't speak English, but they sent me this message back with an interpreter stating that the people of northern Mongolia and her tribe really respect the courage and the strength for the Indigenous people here standing up, because it gave them pride to protect their lands too, and that we're in solidarity. So Thunderbird Woman is used oftentimes as a bridge of solidarity between different tribes and non-Indigenous people all over the world. And I've always said that Thunderbird Woman, you know, the thunders don't have a preference to who it thunders to. You know, it thunders for everybody. It rains for everybody. It doesn't have, you know, it doesn't like me better than it likes you. It thunders for both of us. And so I think that Thunderbird Woman has been a great way to build connections, build bridges in a positive way. And really, we're making hearts. You know, everybody's making these hearts. And of course, that's always the most powerful part, is the heart. Next slide, please. And on the top left, we have a silver medallion made in Japan. So somebody in Japan had made that for me. You have Thunderbird, like people send me this stuff all the time. I have hundreds of photos. I can't post them all, but like there's Thunderbird woman cookies, there's cakes, there's like Thunderbird snowmen people. There's all sorts of medallions. I've had, I don't know, so many medallions given to me of Thunderbird woman. I've just passed them on, of course. And so it's really been a great honor to be a part of something that's really wasn't even my doing. You know, it was more of a lucky fluke. You know, it was just the right time at the right place. And, you know, Thunderbird Woman is very simple. And I think that's part of the reason why. And I've always told people, use Thunderbird Woman to fundraise for your own cause. You know, if you want to make shirts, go ahead and make shirts. If you want to raise money to save a creek, or to help with poverty, or to, you know, create interest in protecting the environment, then use Thunderbird Woman. You don't have to cite me. You don't have to credit me. I don't even need to know about it. Just take the image and go. And I think that that's refreshing for a lot of people, because a lot of times you have to go through so many different consents when it comes to Native art. And it's a very policed situation, and it should be, because there's a lot of appropriation and stuff. But I'm made a little bit different. I'm like, you take it, go with it, and that's it. Next slide, please. And of course, there's tattooing. So, I mean, I always thought this was cool. You know, there's thousands of people that have sent me photos of them, like all over the world, of getting Thunderbird Woman tattooed, you know, on their arm, as a way to show their solidarity, but also to show that they have a strong commitment, you know, for the environment, for the earth, for unity. Thunderbird Woman represents unity. And so a lot of people say, well, non-native people shouldn't get Indigenous art tattooed on them, or whatever. And I'm like, well, they can do mine, because I'm definitely 100%, because this is a unity piece. This is a piece of art that represents everybody working together. And I understand that there's complications. I understand that there's a whole bunch of diversity amongst, you know, people that are trying to change something. And that through this great big field of diversity, we need to lift each other up and build each other up. So, for example, I'm completely anti-establishment. And so, but there may be other people that are, their whole thing is trying to change things through policy or whatever. I'm going to build them up. I'm going to try to build everybody up that's moving in the same direction, and try to lift them up and say, you know what, let's all do this together. And let's put our differences in the same basket, and let's support each other, because that's how change is most effective. The greatest thing that dissolves movements is political ideations, people arguing over politics and how things are supposed to be done. And we're not supporting this group because of that, and we're not supporting them because of this, and blah, blah, blah. And that is so disheartening. Just imagine if we could all support each other and lift each other up and build each other up, despite the fact that we might not agree with their way to get there. That's besides the point. I mean, we'd be narcissistic to think that our way is the only way to save the earth. We really do need everybody to come in and to like throw in their ideas. The more ideas and the more thinking and the more strategy that goes into this, the more successful we're going to be. This is proven in the political science of change. It takes people to get along and to agree on something. That's what changes things. And so I don't discriminate with Thunderbird Woman. I can't, because that goes against the the natural law of thunder. That goes against the natural law of what Thunderbird Woman represents. That goes against the natural law of Josephine Mendamenba. She never discriminated against anybody. Never. She was kind. She was beautiful. And, you know, I'll tell one story. Charlotte, I think this is the last slide, eh?
Yes.
I'll tell you a story about Josephine before I go. Josephine came to me. She was already sick. She wasn't feeling well. And Josephine Boss said, Isaac, I want to go to fast at that special spot that you always take me. It was November during a sideways snowy rain. And I said, Josephine, I said, it's November. It's like a sideways snow and rain. And the place that you want to go to, I got to paddle you there. And I'm going to end up leaving you there. And she says, yeah. I said, and you're not feeling well. She says, I know, but I just want to do this. She goes, I'll be all right. I said, well, you're going to make me really worried if I put you out there. I said, let's smoke a little bit. So we smoked a pipe and I said, yeah, okay, I'll take you out there. During a sideways rain, I took her out to this island, put her out to fast at this very sacred site where the serpents live. And she fasted there during a sideways rain. No fire, nothing. And when I went to go pick her up, she says, seeing your big head in that canoe, you know, gave me the most happiest moment of my entire life. And she did it. She completed her fast out there. It never stopped raining once. And she was filled with thunder and lightning and rain and water and nibbe and land and spirits. And that's what she wanted. And I know that she gave that all back to the people before she left. And that's what Thunderbird Woman is all about. It's about that purity of giving back. It's about making sure that our people are looked after, that all people are looked after, that life is precious, it's a gift. And that when we give, it makes people healthier. We save lives by doing the work that we do. You know, we might not see it, but it does. It makes a difference. And I know for Josephine, she saved many lives. And she will continue to save lives in the future. And that's how I'd like to end my thingy here. So, oh, thank you so much for having me here. Thanks for having me a part of this thing. And I'm not a computer person, so Charla, thank you for helping me navigate through all of the computer stuff to be able to be on this thing here. So, Gwabnanim, Minwa, Nahao, Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, Isaac. Thanks for making me cry.
Nahao.
Yes, I'd like to introduce our third panelist. Marilyn Poitras is Michif from Southern Saskatchewan. She's a lawyer, professor, and film producer who's been recognized for her work as an innovative change maker. Marilyn is grounded in the teachings of the land and carries forward her philosophy that nature is the law. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Isaac and Joanne, for those presentations. That was wonderful. Yeah, so I want to get started here with what we think about as laws and where ideas of law come from and how to maybe grow that thinking, and talk about law coming from nature and humans learning to work within that. And Joanne and Isaac have given you great examples of that. So in joining sort of the team introductions here, I'll tell you that I have two ceremonial names. Nia Askiasqueo Askiawasis is my first name, and that translates into Earth Mother, Earth Child. And my second name is Miku Bisu Squeo, which translates into Red Thunderbird Woman. And it's important that we talk about who we are ceremonially when we do this work, so that we understand that we're coming from a place, we're standing on the foot, to quote one elder, of who we are and what our teachings are. So if I can get you to go to the next slide, Charla, you're going to see that, and you've heard from both presenters so far, that there are several levels of relationship within our environment and potential roles and responsibilities within those relationships. You haven't heard about economic development or resources to be tapped or ways to access resources. The messages that you've heard this morning are how to live within spaces and live within them as part of the ecology, not the dominating force above them. One of the elders that I work with says that everything about what we do on this planet is about our relationships. Everything, nothing is held back from that. And I think that Joanne and Isaac gave you great examples of that. Another elder that I work with says humans are the smallest part of creation, dependent on all else for our very existence. Now, I have a law background. I have studied laws imposed on the colonies. For about 4 decades, I've been a student of law. I've been trained to see law as a tool of control and power, and to understand our place as humans within that power dynamic as tools used to grant or deny access to certain places, certain people, and things that we might have rights to. The rights agenda has a very prominent place in the tug of war over land and resources, and Isaac alluded to this. There are within this tug of war rights that have more leverage and rights that have less. We create hierarchies of rights for people who are trying to access land and resources and those rights ultimately. Next slide, please. Studying our legal rights to land and resources, I started to notice that the rights and how to access them and who can access them shifted. They shifted from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, from corporation to corporation, from government to government, and from judicial decider to judicial decider. I started to see rights as a shell game that we were guessing where they were hidden and how to get access to them. And it was a bit of a lucky streak if you could actually tap into them or not. As a Métis woman, I really noticed the shifting tests for law and the outcomes and the laws themselves around rights, because I had to do my best to make sense of the laws when I was putting rules together, trying to understand legal decisions, making legal arguments, or teaching. Indigenous people in Canada must have had legal rights to the land in North America, or we would not need a royal proclamation from the 1800s. There would be no treaties. There would be no mythology of the doctrine of discovery and how we lost our rights if we never had them in the first place. However, all of the legal energy is spent not on how did those rights get lost, but rather on tests to prove that we ever had them, or whether or not we keep them, or if we use them properly, or who can claim them and when they can claim them. Legal tests and obligations were never imposed on the newcomers in the territories or on the lands whose laws and plants and foods were imported here. Laws of the Indigenous nations were not considered in the larger picture of how the land should be cared for, or who can access it, or whose responsibility it is. And the rights of the inhabitants of the land were held in stark contrast to legal rights. In the creation of rights to land and resources, Legal fictions were being written, and the authors were choosing their own endings depending on who the protagonist was, who the antagonist was, depending on the cost of those rights and the cost of developing the resources. The shell game was everywhere. Indigenous legal rights are carefully, consistently examined and dissected. And in Canada, your legal rights are different from your legal title, and they're separate and held differently by different people and different communities. And we use the courts to find out if we have the rights, can we access the rights? Are they communal rights? Are they individual rights? And to enable access, Indigenous people are categorized and counted and put into a standard and listed and collated for our own good, which is also a shell game. Where do you fit under these standards? Legal fiction, to access rights to land and resources, tells the story that Indigenous people are primitive, yet they had their own governing system. Savages, yet authorized and holding capacity to enter into treaty relationship. The storytellers it's a character in a story who acts with the honor of the crown, with the savage, with the Indigenous person. The crown understands the laws, they understand how to write them, how to rely on them, how to access them, how to make decisions with them. The crown decides where they're kept and which shell to keep them under. Next slide, please. Now I want you to shift with me to my other legal training with Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers in ceremony and traditional teachings, and you've heard a lot of them already. Alma Kaitwe-Hat thinks just like Joanne does. The earth is our mother, the grass is her hair, the water her milk. It's not a space to conquer, resources to be owned and commodified at any cost without regard to the planet. Artists like Jackie Travers use their art to connect, to teach, to learn, and help us see this other world construct. How do you put together these different laws that come from such different places and live on the planet? One says people rule and our laws control the land to meet our needs. And one says we conform to the laws within the lands. If you add to that another component of a very strongly held right in Indigenous communities, and those are inherent rights. What are the rights that we as a species living on the mother hold to thrive here? Is it access to teachers? Is that an inherent right? Access to parents, access to waters, access to shelter or food? Does the water have to be clean? Does the food have to be available to us? My work with elders in traditional law and the understanding of what spiritual law and natural law is, of course, turned my idea of what law is upside down. They challenged me on everything from who's responsible for looking after spaces to asking what are our relationships with trees or standing people, with rocks, who some see as elders. They challenged me to understand what man-made law is next to natural law, and asked me to examine conventional practices of how do you live on the earth. Truly, if you see the earth as our mother and our mother is our first teacher, how is she teaching us the laws? We might learn laws, for example, through traditional teachings, stories, old ways to learn, through spirit stories and teaching, the Echimona teachings, stories that teach very basic lessons, and other teach us about hard, complicated lessons. The story of the Witiko, for example, the greedy person, the insatiable appetite that turns to a disease and that you can never get enough is impacting our planet. Lessons through song and art that you were just hearing about through dance. We may have life lessons also just from simply living. The Mother Earth is a harsh teacher. If you just go outside with no warm clothes, you will see what you will learn about the law of nature. Next slide, please. Laws are in the land. Laws are found everywhere around us. I have an elder that I work with, And I was teaching in a land management course, and we were in cabins out on the land with soil and tree scientists, land managers, Indigenous land managers from across Canada. And at a fire one evening, Gladys expressed that she was reluctant to come to this camp, Maryland, dang it, and to teach with me because she really was supposed to be out picking her medicines before it got too late in the autumn. And now at the fire, she had seen the fireflies, and it was certainly too late for her to pick her medicines. The scientist asked what fireflies have to do with medicines. And Gladys explained to him that she had a contract with those fireflies. It was long-standing, and her mother had told her about this family contract. They both relied on the medicines, you see, and Gladys could only pick what she needed, leaving some for the fireflies. And once they appeared, she would have to stop picking for that season. And now here were the fireflies. She had not picked her medicines, and she would have to wait till the next season. This teaching takes my concept of contract law from my law school training to a whole other level. And it pushed my mind into Western offers, notions of who makes an offer in a contract, who accepts the contract, how do we bind the contract in English law? It's bound through money. And now, what are the rights in that contract, and what are the responsibilities? And does nature get rights as well? We hear so many times that elders are our libraries and they hold our laws. And when we lose them, we will lose the idea and the understanding of what natural law is. We'll lose our universities. So I asked my elders, what will we do when our elders and our teachings aren't available? Well, how will we understand natural law? And Gladys said, Marilyn, Creator does not entrust the laws to human. They are found and left within nature for humans to find. You go and you look for them. They're there always. They don't disappoint. They are always there teaching. Next slide. Putting our modern day teachings into context, we can look at some North American academics and traditional teachers who are grooming our institutions for us to find a new path to understand our relationships with nature, our laws, and our roles here on the planet. A couple of examples are a professor from the University of Regina, Willie Ermine. He lectures on traditional teachings, and he's reimagined ethics and relationship building for humans through what he calls ethical space. He asks us that when humans meet, that we leave any old made-up notions we have, judgments, concepts, and tools at the door. And instead, you come into the space to create a relationship, just to hear, to listen, and to honor the truth of each person's experience. And then you move together through stories to discover and rediscover solutions and insights for how a relationship might grow between us. This practice, using Thunderbird Woman, as Isaac has suggested, would impact government, environmental awareness, environmental development, communities, families, parenting, all of it. Leroy Little Bear is another person he's put his life work into teaching about spirituality and quantum physics. He tells us that science is going to keep running into issues until spirit is returned to the scientific theory, and then we will make leaps and bounds in science. He's also the forefather who spearheaded the modern Buffalo Treaty in Canada, a contract with nature that humans can commit to, a relationship with responsibilities where everyone benefits when responsibilities are met. And they put the grandfather buffalo back into the place of teacher and leader, and rights going to that person, that entity. Next slide, please. Where I come from, we have access to amazing teachers that remind us continually about our place within the natural law and ecological world, and even astrological realms. Wilfred Buck studies and teaches about Cree knowledge from the starscape. There are Cree teachings that tell us that the syllabic system, the Cree language structure, comes from the stars and was gifted to the Cree people. Another elder tells us that if we want to begin to understand the laws of nature, you look outside your window on your door at your home. What does that mountain ash or spruce tree know? How does it react? What are its cycles? Who makes a home in it? What does it feed? Who does it feed? Who does it shelter? That tree lives outside your door as your personal teacher. Another elder teaches, you want to understand about balance, you look to the birds. You can even look to your houseplants to understand the humidity in your home, the effect of language and music the plants are exposed to and when they thrive. So we can ask you in our presentations, what laws are you being taught every day? How are you building relationships? Who are your teachers? Where are your lessons? And do you see yourself in the rights agenda or the responsibility agenda? Thank you to my co-presenters and to Charla for managing us through this whole thing in the most gentle, beautiful way, and to the organizers, of course, of the conference and getting the message out that is really important.
Oh, miigwech. Miigwech to all our amazing lands and water protectors who've shared with us today. We're inspired to return to our lands and waters, to rekindle our relationship. When we express gratitude and acknowledge the life that lands and waters bring, we increase the health and vitality of the natural world. Our words go around the world forever, and our songs and actions send positivity out in all directions. Our role as land and water advocates is a demonstration of self-love and honoring our responsibilities as human beings. So miigwech, we have a few minutes. Would anyone like to ask a question? You can put it in the chat, or yeah, maybe put it in the chat, or you could speak it if we can hear you. That would work. Julie is saying, thank you so very much. The values you shared make so much sense to me. I will cherish this session. I have something for the panelists to consider. Does someone want to talk about social media and other means as a bridge of solidarity? Does anyone want to talk about that? Isaac, I'm thinking in particular about the land back hashtag. Just turn on your microphone. Michael Hoshman says this panel is so insightful and important. For those who might be able to attend, there will be a session of Maya activists and academics at 11 on Indigenous data governance and Mayan communities. It'll be in Spanish and translated into English. Yes, I'm going to take that in for sure. Janice Huber says, thank you, Charla, Joanne, Isaac, and Marilyn. I'm thinking so much about the wholeness that comes through in your sharing, which is very different from how Western education systems separate knowledge into categories. Miigwech. Okay, so that concludes our panel. We truly appreciate everybody for being with us this morning, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium. Have a good day and a wonderful weekend. Stephanie Pine says, miigwech to everyone for your complimentary and wonderful words and images. I'm reminded of a phrase by Joe LaFord, originally from Chiging, Ontario, who said, we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. Yes, right on. Michael says, we're so awestruck, no questions, because so much food for thought. Louis Lopez says, thanks for this panel. It's a very good reflection about knowledge communities, Indigenous people. Okay. Miigwech. Big hug.